Morning, students. I hope everything is okay with you. We're going to start our novel for the first semester for the second stage students. This time we're going to study Animal Farm. In the second semester, we're going to be studying The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway. So this time we're going to start by Animal Farm. This is an introduction to the novella or novel. Novella is a small novel. Okay, Animal Farm is a book written by George Orwell. George Orwell is a British writer. It's a satirical piece focusing on the transformation of the Soviet Union from a revolution to a dictatorship. Each of the major characters in Animal Farm represent a certain faction in Russia. Animal Farm is important because it illustrates how history repeats itself. If you look a bit closer, you can see how certain developments in society surface again over time. Okay, George Orwell, he was born in 1903 and he died in 1950, a year after the book was published. Orwell began life as Eric Arthur Blair. George Orwell was a pen name he adopted later for its manly English country-sounding ring. Of course, the River Orwell is near where George was first born. He spent his early years in India as a lonely boy who liked to make stories and talk with imaginary companions. He began to write before he even knew how, dictating poems to his mother, and perhaps saw this outlet as an alternative to the human relationships he found so difficult. Of course, Orwell never had proper friends. He had problems even in his marriage. He didn't like the rich society. Refuge in words and ideas became increasingly important when Orwell's parents sent him at age 8 to a boarding school in England. Later, instead of going to university, he decided to take a job in Burma with the Indian Imperial Police. Burma at that time was part of the British colony. Orwell wrote about this experience in A Burmese Days in 1934. Burmese Days is a book he wrote later. In the essay, Shooting an Elephant, at odds with British colonial rule, Orwell said he theoretically and secretly, of course, was all for the Burmese and all against the oppressions the British. We see through this, we've just read, that Orwell secretly hated the government. He hated the high society. He hated the school he went to. Because, he didn't like to follow rules. He didn't like to do what people told him to do. And even the story of the elephant, he had to shoot the elephant to show people that he had the power, that he could do things. But deep down, he felt sorry for the elephant. He felt sorry for the Burmese people. And we're going to see this later in his work. He was plagued by, he had all these health issues, of course. Orwell began his writing career seriously. Over the next 2 decades, he wrote newspaper columns, novels, essays, and radio broadcasts, most of which grew out of his own personal experience. Orwell's beliefs about politics were affected by his experiences fighting in the Spanish Civil War. Of course, we're going to study this later. Orwell fought in the Spanish Civil War, but he was he was with the people. He wasn't a communist, he was with the people. He hated dictatorship. And we're going to know this later because Hemingway was there as well. Hemingway says he met him, but really nobody's sure about this. He viewed socialists, communists, and fascists as repressive and self-serving. Orwell particularly supported England during World War II, but remained skeptical of the governments and their willingness to forsake ideals in favor of power. You see, he was with his government during World War II. because he knows what Hitler meant. He hated dictatorship. With each book or essay, Orwell solidified his role as the outsider willing to question any group's ideology. Orwell spoke his mind with Animal Farm, in which he criticized the Soviet Union despite its role in World War II, which is an ally to Great Britain. At first, no one would publish the novel, but when Animal Farm finally appeared in 1945, it was a success. It was later adopted both as an animated film and as a play. You see, that's what we meant, like he was with his country, Russia with his country, against the biggest oppressor, which was Hitler. Okay, in the years since the publication of Animal Farm in 1984, of course 1984 is another great book by George Orwell, which talks about the oppressive governments, both of which invoke visions of modern governments' dangerous powers. Critics have studied and analyzed George Orwell's personal life. Orwell was a man who had a reputation for standing, abide, and even making a virtue of his detachment. This outsider position often led him to oppose the crowd. He was always an outsider. Orwell was always an outsider. He was with the weak. He was, let's say, in modern slang, he was with the underdog. You know what I mean? In explaining how he came to write Animal Farm, Orwell says he once saw a little boy who whipping a horse. You see, that's the good side of Orwell. He saw the good side of people. When he saw a boy whipping a horse, it struck me that if only such animals became aware of their strength, we should have no power over them, and that man exploit animals in much the same way as the rich exploit the workers. He felt sorry for the horse that was beaten by the boy, and he got the idea for the novel. Orwell said it was the first book in which he consciously tried to blend artistic and political goals. Orwell's final novel, 1984, continued that effort with grim portrayal of the world totally under government control. Orwell pursued his writing career faithfully, although it was not always easy. In his final days, he made the statement, they asked him, what do you think about writing? Why'd you write? He said, writing is a horrible, exhausting struggle. One would never undertake such a thing if one were not driven. He said that because he's driven, things around the world make him want to write about the sad, bad things that government oppress on people. He's forced to write. On the publication of Animal Farm in 1945, George Orwell discovered with horror that booksellers were placing his novel on the children's shelves. Of course, I'm so sure all of you think it's a child's story, it's children's story. It's a fable, it's a novella, it's not, for children. It has lots of symbols in it. That's why many people didn't understand the novel at the beginning. Because of the dual identity as children's story and adult satire. This has stayed with Orwell's novel for more than 50 years. So, okay, in this lecture, we talked about an introduction about Animal Farm. Like, we talked about why Orwell decided to write it. He wrote it because he didn't like the oppressor. He was always with the poor. He didn't like the rich society. Even when he was at school, he didn't like school because he felt like an outsider. So that's just the introduction for the book, for Animal Farm. Thank you.